Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and for joining us for the Pre-CLS Club's second guest speaker event. Today, we're going to be hearing from Allanah. Allanah is a recent graduate of San Jose State's CLS training program. We also have our officers here, as well as Michael Bowling, the director of San Jose State's CLS program. And if anybody has any questions for Allanah, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask, or drop them in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. Otherwise, we'll save some time at the end to answer any specific questions. But Allanah and Michael, would you like to introduce yourselves?
No, you can go first, Michael.
Okay. My name is Michael Bowling. I'm the program director of the San Jose State University Clinical Laboratory Scientist and Clinical Genetic Molecular Biologist Scientist training programs. I'm so happy that this club is started, and I'm happy to support in any way. And anyone can email me anytime about general questions.
My name is Allanah, and I'm a recent graduate of the San Jose State CLS program just back in February, so it's only been 2 months. I was part of the spring 2022 class, and I interned at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center here in San Jose, and I've been working with them for a month now. So I'm in chemistry and transfusion for midnights, and yeah, it's great being here, and thank you for inviting me, and I hope I can answer your guys' questions today.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us the chance to hear from you. As I mentioned, on Thursday, it's Medical Laboratory Professionals Week. So it's kind of a rare week where the lab gets a little bit of attention. And I kind of feel like a lot of patients, they aren't aware of the fact that there are CLSs behind the scenes performing testing. I think a lot of people think it's maybe their doctors performing the test for them. But no, it's CLSs working really hard to provide accurate results so that healthcare providers can diagnose and care for their patients using that accurate information. So CLS is kind of a hidden profession, but a really, really important one. So thank you for being here to share what it's been like for you to go through the program. So earlier this year, you completed the training program. Congrats on passing your licensing exam. Can you tell us a little bit about what initially got you interested in this career?
Okay. So I actually graduated from the Philippines, so I'm a foreign graduate, and then I took general biology as my major, and that was with the intention of being pre-med. And then throughout my undergrad, I felt like I was more inclined with lab classes, and it always interested me, like the small details of every single test that I did, and all my grades in labs have been better than my lectures, and there was just something about being in a lab that just interested me. And then I moved to the States 5 years ago, and then my first job was as a lab assistant, and that got me more into the lab field, but I wasn't really sure what I was doing at that point, like what my career growth would be. And then my supervisor was a CLS, and that was the first time I ever heard about it. And so I did like a deep research into it, like how to be a CLS, and everything else from there is what brought me to where I am today.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you were working in a lab. What kind of job did you have, and how do you feel like that kind of overlapped with what you're doing now? Were there any skills that kind of crossed over, or what would you say?
So I worked with CLSs directly, and I was part of a reference lab for dialysis patients, and so I was in the chemistry lab, and I would test whatever chemistry test that you would see when you're a CLS. And as a lab assistant, I would do like all the pre-analytical stuff. So like receiving specimens, aliquoting them, making reagents, setting up the instrument, basically everything up until the final resulting of the specimen that the CLSs do. And I think it was really special the way I was brought into that job, because I mentioned from the start to my supervisor that I wanted to be a CLS. So she took me under her wing, and it basically became a shadowing opportunity for me too. So I got to see her roles as a CLS, and that inspired me. And I got to like see what she does and kind of follow her with that. So I think that's how I honed my lab skills in a sense. So like the basic lab skills, and it was just like a really good bridge into being a CLS.
That's really interesting. So the fact that you were able to work closely with the CLS, you kind of you almost got a leg up there seeing what it was like. So that could be a great thing for anybody looking to go through this program. If you have an opportunity to find a job where you're working alongside other CLSs, I think many of the CLSs are happy to tell you a little bit more about the career and show you what they're doing and explain things. So yeah, I think that sounds like an awesome job that you had before starting the program. So you mentioned that you graduated from a university in the Philippines. What was it like to get the prerequisites done for you? Had you completed those, or how did you go about finding a place to take those?
Yeah, so I think it was harder for me just because I had to go through the extra step of getting all my classes approved here in the States. And then I realized that I had to take 3 more classes, which are the majors, the hematology class, the medical micro class, and the immunology class, which I all took in De Anza back in 2019 and 2020. So I took those 3 classes in De Anza, and then I took an extra chemistry class in UC Berkeley Extension as well. And everything else was for my undergrad. So all the general bio classes that are required for CLS classes, the physics class I took from my undergrad. But through De Anza and UC Berkeley Extension is where I took the major prerequisites that are required for the program.
So when you took those classes through De Anza, was it easy for you to add those classes, or was there kind of a waiting period before you could join? I heard they have an MLT program. As somebody who just wants to take those classes as a CLS prep, was it easy for you?
During that time, I don't know if it's changed because I think their MLT program coordinator changed too, but when I was applying, there was like a wait list for it because the way they do it is their priority is students who are going through the MLT program, and then people who are taking the classes as is for prerequisite classes for CLS programs are on a wait list basis. And I had to wait. It's just a luck of the draw, honestly. I thought I would have to wait longer, but they took me in only half a year before, I only had to wait for like half a year before I got in, and it was like semester by semester that I had to wait for a class. So I was able to finish all my prerequisites in a year, which I think is kind of lucky because I heard people take longer to wait. So I guess it just depends on how many MLT students there are and how many classes or how many seats they have available to pre-CLS students.
Got it. And Michael, maybe for anyone who doesn't know about what an MLT is, could you explain a little bit about that?
Okay, so in the hospital, there's different licensure available and different responsibilities for different kind of licenses. So you need a license to be a phlebotomist, and you would draw the blood, and those are typically lab assistants as well. And then the next step up then in the hierarchy, I guess you could call it, laboratory hierarchy, would be MLT. So MLTs are allowed to perform wave testing and also moderate complexity testing. And then if you move up the food chain a little bit more, you get to CLSs, and CLSs are the highest licensure for clinical laboratory testing, and you're allowed to do high complexity testing. So a simple way to look at it would be that if you were going to evaluate and differentiate cancer cells, maybe that might be a complex test for a leukemia patient who needs a differential. That would be a high complexity test.
Got it.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So Allanah, we've heard a little bit about your lead up to the application. What about the application process itself? What was that overall experience like for you?
Okay, so I actually was a two-time applicant. The first time I applied was back in 2020 for the spring 2021 class. And I started with the prerequisites, so I finished all of those. And I also want to note that I don't have a phlebotomy license, which kind of made me nervous because I know a lot of people like to have a phlebotomy license before applying, which I think is also a very strong suit to have. So I applied with just the prerequisites under my belt and probably like a year and a half of work experience as a lab assistant. And I got all the way into interviews, and then I got waitlisted for a hospital, and then it ended there. So I took a year off before I reapplied, and I retook my chemistry class because I already knew to myself that my grades were kind of like my weak point in my application. So I retook my chemistry classes. I kept continuing on with my work. And yeah, that was basically the gist of my application process. I got accepted into the program spring 2022, and I just graduated this year, spring 2023.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really good to hear from someone who applied twice. So when
Martine?
yeah,
Oh, if I may interrupt, I just wanted to tell everyone that if you apply for the program and you don't get in, don't feel completely destroyed or don't get too sad, because keep in mind that for our last cycle, we had 209 applicants for about 30 spots. So you need to be in the top 15-20% of all of those applicants. And if you do reapply, exactly like Allanah did, you want to try and make improvements, and that would be something you might want to highlight in your essay. So we do like it when people reapply. We don't think it's a bad thing. We think it shows determination and commitment to the field.
awesome. So question for you, Michael. Do you give second-time applicants the opportunity to get some feedback about their first application?
Yes, we do. So what you can do is email, there's an email on the website, cls-group@sjsu.edu. And I would recommend waiting a few weeks after, unfortunately, you get the letter or the email that says you're not in, because we're really busy right after that trying to match applicants to training sites. But if you give it a few weeks and then email the group email, my staff gives very extensive replies. They're very supportive. So yes, please do email for feedback, and you can even refer to this meeting, this lecture, and say I said it. So
Great. So Allanah, what did you feel like it was about your second application that really worked?
Okay, I think what I like to highlight with people who always ask me that question is your personal statement is really important. So the second time I applied, I made sure to highlight all my improvements on my personal statement, and just showing initiative that you did something about your application and it's not the same as your first time and that you're better the second time around. I think it shows a lot. And I also, during my first application, when you're ranking your sites, I limited myself to places that were only close to me. And I told myself the second time I really have to just branch out and just rank all the sites, no matter how far they are, and put them on my list, because you'll never know where you get in. And that's the most important part, is to get in. So I ranked everything the second time around and not limiting myself just because of location. And I also, at work, I asked for more opportunities, and I did get that. So I told my supervisor that I didn't get in. And then there was like a lot of changes at my workplace. I think it was just really good timing for me, which is very unique. Our company was closing down at the same time, so I felt like it was a really bad year for me. Like, I didn't get into the program, my company was closing down. And then she told me that they were relocating to another location in the East Coast. And if I wanted, I could like go with them as they're setting up shop. So I actually got to see a new lab set up from the ground up, and that gave me even more lab skills under my belt. So I got to see instruments being validated. I got to see like QC set up, like everything. And it really like pushed me harder to apply the second time around, and it gave me a lot more stories to tell during my interviews. And I think that's what made me a really strong applicant the second time around. So I
Wow,
think that.
that's really cool. That's awesome that you had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So speaking of the interview process, what advice would you give for how an applicant could prepare for that? And how were you successful in that part of things?
Well, did San Jose State go back to panel interviews, Michael, or is it still virtual?
It's still the same process. So just to give a quick background to everyone else. So what happens is that if you make it to the second round of the application process, what happens is that your emails are sent out to every one of our ed coordinators. And then the ed coordinators will reach out to you and let the group know how they plan to hold their interviews or tours or whatever they may choose for it to be. So there's no interviews on San Jose State campus. What we've done is that we've given the hospital sites ample time to evaluate candidates, and they're allowed to interact with the candidates any way they want, including holding tours or on-site interviews at their hospital.
Okay. Yeah, so at that point, once you get invited to interviews, I reached out to hospitals that I wanted to intern at, and then you have your individual interviews. But generally speaking, I think they really look more into your personality and your emotional intelligence at that point. I think, especially with my hospital, when Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, VMC, they're the only one who did an in-person interview at the time. Everyone else was virtual. So I met up with my ed coordinator. His name's Stephen Wong, and he intentionally said that he's looking for someone who's emotionally intelligent, because at that point of the application, I'm pretty sure San Jose State knows and education coordinators know that you're smart enough for the program. They just want to see someone who can survive basically the 1 year and, still want to be a CLS at that point. So I think just telling them what your unique points are and what you think would make you a good CLS is the most important thing, and to just really show your personality during your interviews and what sets you apart from the others.
Got it. So was that one of a few lab tours that you went on, or how did you do that portion of things? And what were you looking for out of the lab that you most wanted to work at?
Mm-hmm. So you get that email from San Jose State that tells you you're invited to interviews, and then it's your initiative to reach out to the education coordinators. You get a contact list of all of the hospitals that are affiliates. And then I sat down for a week, just going back and forth with all the hospitals, setting up dates, because they give you dates that they're available, and then you have to plan out your whole month. I took a lot of break from work for a month in around September, October, I think, just to get all of those done. Because it also, how you have work, you have school, you have your whole life besides this whole application, but you really have to set some time apart to be in these interviews and make sure you get in. So there was random weekdays where I had to be off work because the only available times for that hospital was a Wednesday at lunchtime. But if it's really what you want, then you would make time for it. And most of them are virtual, which is really good. So I could set them up back to back. I'm at home and then they're an hour apart. I went as far as Salinas for some, and then all the way up to, I might get it mixed up because I also applied to SF State at the same time. So it was pretty busy for me, applying, I guess, totaling it all up. I interviewed at around more than 20 hospitals in a month. Yeah,
What?
You could call me desperate at that point, because I was I was a second applicant and I really wanted to get in. So I applied to more than 20 hospitals. SF State has its own list of hospitals too. So I was mixing all of those up and getting all of those interviews down. And yeah.
Wow, so you must have been, so you were busy. You were busy.
Yes, it was a very busy month. So I think really the application process, like I say, is the most stressful part of this whole thing. Once you get that yes from a hospital and San Jose State, then you're good.
And is there anything else that you want to share about your application experience, or anything you think is important for future applicants to know before we move on?
I think doing your research on the hospitals too is important. You have to be intentional with it. Even though I say like apply to everything, you have to know at least a little bit about the hospital so you can make conversation with them and know what you're getting yourself into. Because it's also, if you're interviewing the hospital, and you have to think of it as your career ahead of you. So you want to be in a hospital where you see yourself working on it. So you have to see if they match what you want your career to be in. And just knowing their background, because a lot of hospitals are very different in the way they test stuff, like some are smaller than the others. So it depends on like what kind of pacing you want in your life. And yeah, that's all I can think of for now. And just always following up too, because like in the whole jumble of things, you have so many emails. Just make sure that you follow up with them. And it's also always nice to send a thank you letter after and just tell them that you really want to be in their hospital and that you see that it's a good match. And I think they appreciate that kind of stuff if you make things personal.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you. So I've heard that Santa Clara Valley Medical Center is one of the biggest hospitals in our area, and it's also considered a level 1 trauma center. What does it mean for a hospital to be a level 1 trauma center? And what does that mean for you in the lab? And is that something that made you excited to work there, or how did you feel about that going into your training?
Ever since I started applications, VMC was always my #1 spot because I wanted to be in a training program or in a hospital that would cover a lot of interesting stuff. So I don't just see them on paper and by studying, because being in a trauma center, and we're the county hospital, so we serve the uninsured, the homeless, like everything or everyone in the county. So you see a lot of very interesting stuff in our hospital, and it's very fast paced because we get a lot of samples a day. And even though it's stressful, you get to see all these very interesting situations, which I think throughout the whole program sticks with you. And I think that's what helped me out ultimately in my ASCP exam, just remembering them through the bench more so than it was through the book.
Got it. That's awesome. So let's see here. Is there anything that you recommend people who are preparing for clinical internship to do? Is there anything that is just a must-have, or anything that you like keep in your bag to refer to? Just, any little things like that. Any tips you have for people about to begin their placement?
Once you do get accepted into a hospital, even San Jose State told me, is to take a break, which I think is the most important thing, because it's 1 year nonstop and you really like put all your energy and time into it. So take a small break, maybe have a little gap from if you are working, and maybe like a couple weeks off is nice. And in terms of references, I think it's nice to have, me personally, I like keeping small notes. So I have like a very small notebook for when I'm on the bench and I'm with my CLS. I'm just jotting things down. Might be like very messy handwriting, but I transfer that over to my cleaner notes after. And in terms of reference books, I really like the BOC book. That was definitely the Bible of the year. And I forgot the name of the book, but the purple and gold book that has very interesting drawings. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of it before.
Yeah.
It's from the LSU book. That one's really great too, for like really quick notes in a fun way. And you have all these mnemonics and all of that. And I personally didn't use HAR that much. I don't know if you guys have heard of the HAR book. It's pretty similar to the BOC book, but I know a lot of students also love using that book as a reference book. So I think those 3 books are the greatest in terms of studying throughout the whole year for your quizzes and your exams.
So during was it 52 weeks of training? What did a normal week look like for you?
So Mondays would be your lecture days, and for the most part, they're pre-recorded. The only live class that we had was for transfusion. So you would have to sit down from, I think it was like 9 or 10 a.m. to around 3 p.m. for a live class. But other than that, it's pre-recorded, so you pace yourself throughout the whole week. And they're really good with keeping up with just these pre-recorded lectures. So I start as early as Saturday sometimes if it's uploaded already, and I like just watch for an hour or two, and I spread that throughout the week. But I keep my Mondays as my intentional study day, and I just study as much as I can that day, and then also have some personal time too. And then Tuesdays to Fridays is when you're in the hospital. Sorry, I'm just doing something. Okay, so Tuesdays to Fridays is when you're in the hospital. And in my hospital, for the most part, it's from 7:30 to 4 p.m. And after that, I would drive home. That's around like 30 minutes. And I like finishing things early. So I go to work right away and like study for at least an hour or two. Not too crazy, just think that I try to remember throughout the week. And I also try to take my lecture exams before the weekend because I like having the weekend to myself. But I also know that a lot of people don't study that much during the weekdays and use their weekends as their study days and take their weekly exams right before the deadline on Sundays, which works too. I've tried that method as well, but it really depends on you. So Mondays you have to yourself because it's your lecture day. Tuesdays to Fridays are when you're in the hospital, and it depends on how busy you are at the hospital. It might get tiring for you. So just take that into account. And then you have your weekends. So I think San Jose State gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can like manage your time. And it's really just up to you to be on top of things.
Got it. Let's see. So kind of along those lines, how did you take what you were learning in the lectures every week and prepare for the licensure exam? Was it kind of like a matter of reviewing the exams that you had during the year, or how did you save your material, and what was your preferred study strategy?
I think what's great about the San Jose State program is you're constantly reviewing throughout the whole year because your lectures don't always line up with what rotation you're in at the hospital. Like for me, for example, I started San Jose State with micro as our first lecture for spring, but in my hospital, I was training in chemistry. So I was juggling those two subjects at the same time, and then give it like the next semester, we're on to our transfusion lecture, but I'm in micro. So at that point, I already had my micro lecture. So I kind of know how to work in the hospital, but I'm still figuring out transfusion. So it's like you're constantly reviewing everything throughout the whole year, which I think is nice because it makes you like stay on top of it all the time. And in terms of preparing for the licensure exam, I think I honestly didn't review that much for it intentionally afterwards because I felt like throughout the whole year is already a review in itself because you're constantly having your quizzes every week at your hospital. I don't know how other hospitals do it, but I also have quizzes at my hospital like every week. You have your bench quizzes, your unknowns. So you're always being tested. And I think as long as you're really focused on those quizzes throughout the whole year, you will remember stuff by the end of the year, and just refreshing everything for a week or two before your licensure exam will be enough for you to pass, in my opinion.
So were you stationed in one department for a number of weeks, or did you kind of switch between departments like you do now as a generalist daily, or how was that kind of set up?
It was also in blocks. So my year personally was 3 months of chemistry, and then I move on to micro, which is also around 3 months. And then I go to hematology for 3 months, and then I go to transfusion for 2. So it was blocks. I didn't really rotate throughout the whole year.
Did you have to perform phlebotomy or do blood draws?
I did, and I think it's funny because that was like my hardest week, which is ironic, but it's because I never had phlebotomy experience. So that was mixed in with my micro rotation. So before I started micro, I had 2 weeks in phlebotomy, so I had to do outpatient draws and I had to do inpatient draws, and I had a task of finishing at least 100 draws for those 2 weeks.
Wow.
And yeah.
Okay, that's almost similar to what phlebotomy trainees have to do as well.
Exactly. I think other hospitals have their different ways of doing phlebotomy week, but for my hospital, that's how it goes. It's 2 weeks of phlebotomy.
Awesome. That's good to know. It's scary at first, but totally doable.
Totally doable.
So what department was your favorite and which was most challenging to you?
I really enjoyed transfusion. It was my favorite, and I think that stemmed from me just liking it as a prerequisite when I was in Dianza. And a little side note, it was also great taking prerequisites in Dianza, and I highly recommend it if you're considering it, because your professors there are also CLSs, and they're actually, some of them actually are part of the program itself, and you'll see them soon. And I think it's just great how they teach you in Dianza, because it's the way you are going to get trained on the bench too. And I enjoy transfusion for the logic of it, and just because I'm very detail oriented, and it's nice, or it gives me a thrill knowing that every little step there is very important to a point where you cannot make a mistake, which makes it very dangerous too. But I just like it and I enjoy it. And I think the hardest for me was chemistry. Was hard to understand because theory is really different, and then when you're on the bench, it's all machines, so you really can't, it's hard to connect the two. And another interesting one actually was, and it took me by surprise, was hematology, because I always struggled with it lecture wise, especially during my prerequisite, and then I wasn't confident in calling my cells and counting. I never thought that I would like have accurate counts, but on the bench it was pretty interesting seeing interesting cases of cancer, like especially in my hospital, which is why I liked it in the first place, as we have a lot of interesting cancer cases. And they let you shadow them too when they do their bone marrow transplants or their bone marrow biopsies with the pathologists. So it's nice. I think that was one of my most favorite parts of the program, was that part, because it really connects you to the patients. You're always in the lab, you're seeing their samples, but to be able to go up to the floors and see bone marrow being aspirated, I think that really connected me to the patient, and knowing that what we do is very important in the field too of medicine, and that what we do is really important to the patients as well.
Definitely. Like the patient is more than just a number, and got to see that. That's really cool. So one of our officers asked a really great question last time that I want to ask you as well. What advice do you have for balancing those 4 days of being on site with your lectures, and how do you maintain your mental and physical health during that time?
It's actually pretty tough, but I think if you're intentional with it, it can be done. I like setting up my schedule for the week. So Mondays, I feel like, is my slowest day, as long as you have a pre-recorded lecture. And as I said earlier, I like getting a head start on that. If it's uploaded early, then I take it by chunks throughout the week, instead of sitting down for 5 hours watching a lecture. I don't think you can absorb that much information in one day. So I like taking it in chunks. And I think small steps consistently is so much better than rushing through everything last minute. So with that in mind, I think as long as you set up a schedule for yourself and you stick with it and have some time to yourself to just relax and take a breather. Like for me personally, I started working out consistently during the program, and that's like an hour to myself where I can just unwind, and it gives me a lot more energy after to focus on what's important too. And like I said earlier, so I like finishing my quizzes early. So if that works for you, I think that opens up a big window for you during the weekend to either rest for a bit or get a head start on next week's lectures. So I feel like as long as you're on top of things and not letting them like snowball, then you will have a lot of time to yourself as well throughout the whole week.
That's great. I think you really reiterated what Adriel said as well, to space things out over the week just to make it easier for yourself, and not have it turn into one giant mountain of work. So that's great. So let's see here. What did you most enjoy overall about being part of the San Jose State training program, or just your training overall?
I think I was really lucky to be a part of the program because it was a toss-up when I was applying to both SF State and San Jose State. They were doing their applications at the same time. And I put my hospital as my #1 spot for San Jose State. And then for SF State, I put Stanford in. And those were like really close competition for me as well. Like it doesn't matter to me which one I get into because I want to be part of either of them. So it was a toss-up. So it was just like a matter of who offered something to me first. And it was San Jose State. And I was very lucky to be a part of the program because I think Michael, Charlene, and Amber, they're also on top of things. So you always get constant reminders, and it's just very well organized and very seamless and very streamlined. And even though me and my classmates from other hospitals didn't get to see each other in person, the fact that someone made a group for us to connect in, I think was really good as well. Because then you have that portal where you can share your insights from other hospitals, which I think is great. Because leading up to your licensure exam, you're considering where you're going to apply for work after, and you want to see like how other hospitals function, you know. And for my particular hospital, it was really great because I think we get the most students. So every class, my hospital gets 6 students. And since it's one class every 6 months, there's 12 students at all times. And it's nice seeing 12 students in the same hospital, and it's like a support group. And my education coordinator sets up meetings every month and study times. So it's just nice having a big group where you can study together and talk about the program. And I think that was what was great about the San Jose State program and VMC in general.
That's interesting. I didn't realize so many students were accepted with each class. That sounds like it would just instantly give you a nice group to work with, and that's awesome. So how many CLSs are working with you there, and what's your what does a normal day look like for you now that you are an employee there, and you're a generalist there? What does your day look like?
It's actually nice if you get accepted into a hospital that you trained at, because it's a very seamless process after. When I first started a month ago, it felt like I was retraining in the departments as a student, but everything comes to you surprisingly. You feel like you forget things throughout the whole year as a student, but in my hospital, they're very hands-on. Even as a student, you get to like preliminary verify stuff, and they make you actually work. So you get to train as a CLS as well. And that made my training as an actual CLS, I think, a little easier. And I'm training day shift, even though I'm in midnight shift. So our day shift team would be around, I'd say 10 CLSs. And our off shift team will be, for one department, our off shift team would be around just 3 to 4. And it gets really busy, especially if it's understaffed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a struggle. I think I started in chemistry and it was very fast paced. And it was a struggle my first few weeks, but I think I'm getting the hang of things. And yeah.
So do you usually begin your shift with doing QC? And is there like a time of day that's most busy for you? Is that after kind of like the morning blood collections, or does your day kind of get easier as it goes? Do you have to hand off to the next shift and that kind of thing as well?
It's very sporadic. I really thought there would be a better schedule to things, but I have started just keeping my mind open every day and expecting whatever will happen, because usually your day would start, depending on what you're assigned to do, there are machines that are QC'd already when you come in, and mostly all instruments will have a backup. So one is already ready to run while you're setting up the other one. So I come in either setting up an instrument or I'm handling the instrument that's already ready to run. And the day when we come in, morning draws are already kind of done. So that's midnight shifts, busiest time of the day, around 4 to 6 a.m. So when I come in, it's pretty smooth until around lunchtime where it gets busy again, unless there's problems. And I think for chemistry, it's either a really good day or a really bad day, and it really depends on how your machines are acting. That's the biggest struggle with chemistry, is just your QC issues, which I haven't really developed yet as a new CLS, is the troubleshooting, which I feel like is a very important part of being a CLS as well, which is also very interesting because it makes me feel like an engineer in a sense, because you're always like tinkering with your instruments, which I feel like is very fun as well.
Awesome. So do you feel like many of the CLSs you work with are men, or do you feel like there are also quite a few women CLSs who work with you? Is it a male-dominated field?
It's actually more female dominated in my hospital, but I think consensus it's more female dominated. I'd say percentage wise, it's like 75% women, 25% men in my hospital.
Interesting. And do you feel like there are a good number of younger CLSs? Do you see kind of an age divide between the CLSs, or is there a good mixture of ages as well?
I think there was also an article that came out a couple of years ago, and I do see it in my hospital where it's an aging group right now. There's a lot of retiring or soon to retire CLSs, and that's opening up a lot of positions for the new CLSs, which is why I feel like there's a very big demand in CLSs right now. So I think there's a good number of people who are about to retire and a lot of people who are just very new to the field. So I think it's like the best time to be in the field right now, because you're also getting the knowledge of people who are about to leave. And I feel like that's also very important knowledge to have for the new generation of CLSs as we go through our careers.
That was going to be my next question for you too. Do you feel like there are a lot of options for you as a newly licensed CLS? Do you feel like you have your choice of where to work? Do you have a good flexibility with what hours you can work? Can you pick up overtime? Or do you feel like there's a struggle with just having enough people working on a shift? Or what's your sense of that?
Or the months leading up to my graduation, when I was already considering jobs, my hospital had a lot of per diem applications, so that was not full time, and I was already like trying to figure out what other hospitals I could apply to. But when I researched, there was a lot everywhere, and there's constantly a lot of openings in every hospital for every shift, whether it's full-time, part-time, just relief staff. So I think there's a really good number of positions out there that are available. And there's also biotech, if that's something that you want to get into. I know a lot of people who graduate from the program and move on to biotech, which I feel like is also very interesting. And yeah, I think there's no worry for now, at least, of like how many positions are going to be open by the time you apply for work, because it's very in demand right now. I think they need us more than we need them. It really is. Yeah, I know one of my classmates, because I only stuck with applying to my hospital because they ended up having a position, but I have a classmate who moved on to another hospital, and she ended up applying to 5 different hospitals, and they all offered her a position. So at that point in time, it's more of you really knowing what you want. So I think throughout the whole year, it's also good to figure out what you want and keep an open mind with all the departments and see what works for you, so that it's easier for you when you apply and you see what you really want. Because there's a lot of options out there. It's just a matter of which one you want.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really great point, that there are not just positions in hospitals for CLS. There's a huge variety. Michael, would you agree with that? And what kind of positions, what kind of places could a CLS potentially work, to your knowledge?
Oh, and I mean, especially in the Bay Area, you have so many options. I have so many hospitals and biotech sites contacting me and asking how they can access our graduates. And I just tell them, hey, if you have job descriptions you'd like to us to distribute to them, we'd be happy to do that, but we don't hand out their emails. But to answer your question, you could work in biotech, and biotech tends to be maybe more pipetting. It's a different, they're usually private institutions. And that is really exploding just with 23andMe and things of that nature, and send out testing exploding. There's tons of opportunities there. You can work in large hospitals, you can work in small hospitals. If you work in a larger hospital, you may be able to specialize in, say, just one lab, like virology or microbiology, something specialized, even like mycology. But if you go to a small hospital, you might be more likely to work multiple benches, multiple departments in one shift. So you might have a laboratory that has chemistry, hematology, micro, and you're expected to do all of those benches. So some people like that, and that's kind of more generalist type of approach to CLS profession. Me personally, I've always worked in hematology or something related to it. So right out of school, I was specialized. So that was the route I chose to go. If you want to travel, I got to teach internationally. I got to teach in Ukraine. I also got to teach in Vietnam. And people always ask me, "Oh, did you teach English?" I said, "No, I taught clinical lab science." So there's so many fun opportunities. And then there's a lot of private organizations too you can get involved with. And I highly encourage that. There's a lot of fun meetings. It's just, there's a really great community with so many networking options and so many job options everywhere, because everywhere has a hospital. You're going to be in need forever. So
Definitely. So I think those are all of our questions for you. I want to ask you one last question, Allanah. Is there anything else that you feel like is really important for future CLSs to know, or anything else about your experience that you want to share?
I just wanted to say I'm really happy that there's a pre-CLS club now. I think that's a very good step towards the future of the career, because even just like 2 years ago, which is when I applied, there was nothing like this yet. And just having all these resources available to you before you apply is really great. So congratulations on that. And it's a really good field to be in. I feel like it's very underrated, and it's the prime time to be in the field. And just know that what you do will make a difference, and it's very fulfilling. I think your career, even if it's not this career, like any career that you get into, it is what you make it to be. So if you look into it with like open eyes and seeing yourself develop skills along the way, and you can like go to like very different paths. Like you can be in management, you can be a teacher, which I kind of want to be maybe down the road. Like right now, I had so many plans for myself before graduating. I was like, I maybe want to be in management, or maybe I want to be a teacher after, but like your first few years, you're just overwhelmed with the job. So I feel like I'm going to pace myself first. And also, I think I forgot to mention earlier with like the job opportunities. I know a lot of people who work 2 jobs, if that helps too. I know a lot of people in my hospital who work full time, and then they pick up shifts at a different hospital per diem on weekends. So there's really a lot of opportunities and fun ones as well. I know a manager in my hospital, his very first job out of the program, which was very interesting to me, was he signed up with NASA in the Moffett airfield, and he helped out with the research with astronauts who are like labs on weightlessness, and how your labs would be different if you were like weightless in space versus if you were here under gravity on Earth, which I found was very interesting. So I think it's a really good balance. I think the field is perfect for people who are very interested in science and in healthcare. It's a very good mix of science and medicine. So it's a really good field to be in, and I hope all of you guys find your spot in the program sometime soon. It'll be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge with us. And I think we can all take so much from what you said. You shared a lot of great information with us. So I really want to thank you for sharing your time with us. It really means a lot. And I don't think we have any questions in the chat, but if anybody who is here would like to ask. This is our last chance to ask Allanah a question before we let her go. Otherwise, is there a way that you could share that people could reach out to you if they have any questions later?
Yeah, I have my email address. I could like type it in here too.
Awesome.
And then I also have LinkedIn. So if you guys can just find me, I'm happy to like answer anyone's questions. I really want to be like a mentor in this field. I feel like it's very fulfilling, and it's one of the things that I really have as a career goal for myself. So thank you also for reaching out to us to be a speaker in this. And I would love to be one again sometime in the future when I have more experience under my belt and can share new stories with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, we appreciate it so much. So I think we are going to end it here. Thanks to Michael for being here. Thanks to our officers, and thank you all for attending. We do have another upcoming event next Thursday where we will be hearing from Julie Ballard, and she has 25 years of experience as a CLS in more quality management roles. Until then, again, thank you so much, Allanah. We really appreciate your time, and hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you soon.